KGNU, a bi-weekly look at the local, national, and international issues affecting working people along the Front Range. The goal of the labor exchange is to present the workers' point of view, which is often overshadowed by the business side of the story. We thank our listener members for their support. I'm Lynn Baker, and I'm the host for the Labor Exchange. Tonight I'll be talking with Richard Curtis, a reporter for the People's Weekly World newspaper. But first, the news.
We're fighting for our lives, healthcare and pensions, that's what we mean when we say that means justice.
Now you need to get your pencils and paper ready because I'm going to be giving you some numbers to call. Newt Gingrich has formed his own secret task force to suggest changes to the workers' compensation system, according to the newspaper Roll Call. The 9-member team includes representatives from the business community, including Health South, Walmart, Disney, and Bell Atlantic. It excludes representatives from labor and the insurance industry. Senator John Ashcroft, a Republican from Missouri, has introduced Senate Bill 1129 that would eliminate the Fair Labor Standards Act, reported the Colorado Labor Advocate. This bill would eliminate overtime pay for hours worked in excess of a 40-hour work week. Instead, an employee would be forced to work 160 hours, even 20 straight 8-hour days, before being paid overtime. Workers can voice their opinions on this bill by contacting Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell at area code 202-224-5852 and Senator Hank Brown at area code 202-224-5941. A recent article in the February 9th edition of the Colorado Labor Advocate cited the following statistics as a justification for raising the minimum wage. Between 1947 and 1973, the median paychecks of American workers more than doubled, with the bottom 20% gaining the most. Since 1973, median earnings have fallen by about 15%, and the bottom 20% lost the most. More than 40% of all earnings gains have gone to the richest 1%. The top 20% of all households now control more than 55% of all the wealth. The rest of America splits the rest. The Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1001, recently had its position upheld in an unfair labor practices charge it filed against the Regional Transportation District with the Colorado Department of Labor, reported the Colorado Labor Advocate. Chief Administrative Law Judge Edwin L. Felter, Jr. determined that RTD must bargain collectively on any terms and conditions of employment specified in the company's drug and alcohol policy that exceeded federal mandates. Welcome back to the Labor Exchange. I'm speaking tonight with Richard Curtis, who is a reporter for the People's Weekly World newspaper. Richard Curtis is covering the strike against turkey processor Longmont Foods by approximately 650 members of the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 7. The strike began February 6. The union and the company are differing on wages and health care costs. The company proposed a wage increase of 10 cents an hour in the first year of the pact and 20 cents in each of the 2 succeeding years, and wants to raise the deductibles that workers pay under their health insurance. The union wants a raise of 45 cents the first year, 20 cents in the second, and 15 cents in the third. It also wants to keep medical deductibles at their current level. I'm talking with Mr. Curtis about the strike because Local 7 members from the turkey processing plant were unable to appear on the show. Richard, besides the wage and health benefit issues, what are the other concerns the workers are expressing to you?
The other big issue would be working conditions, although it's certainly true from my experience on the picket line that the rank and file is most concerned with the wages.
Were they talking about like safety issues as well, or what other kinds of working conditions?
Well, safety issues primarily. It's really difficult work. Processing turkeys. It requires a lot of manual dexterity. There's obviously a lot of cutting involved, and a number of employees over the years have suffered serious injuries, some of them debilitating.
So is there a high incidence of carpal tunnel syndrome?
Well, from what I've heard, it's not carpal tunnel syndrome per se that's been problematic, although some of the workers that I've met do have cases of arthritis that are fairly advanced. So the connection may be there.
Mm-hmm. What other issues have they been bringing up?
Well, it really is the money. You know, when you talk to the rank and file, that's the first thing they'll mention, and that's what they'll mention over and over again.
Have they been in a wage freeze situation in the past, and now they expect to recoup that money?
Well, that's one way of putting it. Wages are determined by the contract, and so when the contract doesn't have provisions for increases, then there are no increases.
So in their last contract, they didn't have any wage increases?
Actually, I'm not that familiar with the last contract. I believed in the last 3 years that there weren't wage increases included in the contract.
And how has the company's profitability been?
That seems to depend on who you ask. In the negotiations, the company presents an argument that it's not been that profitable and therefore can't afford these increases, which I think is fairly standard in negotiations. The union's analysis of its profitability is different. And inasmuch as Longmont Foods is a subsidiary of ConAgra, which is a huge corporation, the union would argue that profits from one subsidiary can be hidden by diverting how income is shown to other subsidiaries.
So has the union come up with a figure as to how profitable Longmont Foods is?
I've not seen those figures.
Okay. What has been management's response to the workers' concerns?
Their appeal is to this argument of profitability, and their point being that since they don't have the profitability, that they're not in a position to do much to significantly improve the working conditions, and therefore, also not in a position to increase the wages the way the workers want, and on and on.
Now, what are exactly some of the working conditions that the workers would like to see improved?
Well, the first and most dramatic place in which working conditions is a problem is with the people who take the turkeys off the trucks. Longmont Foods also owns farms where they raise the turkeys, and those turkeys are brought by truck into the processing plant. The people who take the birds off are the first ones to handle them, and it's a step or two into the process, the birds are killed. Those working conditions tend to be very exposed to the elements, and so can be either very, very hot in the summertime or very cold in the wintertime. And it also isn't lit very well, so it makes it a little harder to make delicate movements with the birds when you're trying to take this flapping animal and hang it up on a rack that carries it to the next person. And there are similar concerns along the line from what I've heard.
So are the workers seeking better light or a covered area in which to do their work?
But I've not spoken specifically with people about how they envision improving the working conditions. And I think that that's been something that the negotiating team has taken up the details of, but the rank and file is just interested in having the conditions improved.
I see. I heard that the Union Bargaining Committee made a proposal last Friday that the members rejected. Are you familiar with this proposal and why it was rejected?
Well, that would have been the third proposal, as a matter of fact. And the situation is a little complex because there are, in fact, two locals that are represented with one contract. They were certified as a joint bargaining unit in 1961 by the NLRB and have had joint contracts ever since.
That's the National Labor Relations Board.
Exactly. The higher paid of the two locals is the smaller Operating Engineers Local Number 1, which represents the truck drivers, mechanics, service technicians, people who take care of the mechanical details of the plant, skilled labor. Their side of the contract has not been in dispute, and the operating engineers have in fact voted to approve each of the three contracts by an overwhelming majority. they're a much smaller local. So the actual fate of the contract is in essence determined by what Local 7 of the United Food and Commercial Workers want to do, with their numbers being so much greater.
So why did the workers reject in Local 7 the contract, whereas the operating engineers members didn't?
It would be the 80 cents an hour increase over the 3 years versus the 50 cents an hour increase that was offered by the company.
So the company offered an 80 cent increase over 3 years for the operating engineers?
Actually, I've not looked at the details of the operating engineers' contract. The numbers are different. So what people have been talking about in terms of what's at dispute is only the UFCW portion of the contract. The operating engineers have built into their contract means by which they can increase their salaries through education and training. So they're not as tied to wage increases contractually. They have more freedom to impact that as individuals.
I see. Now, how would you describe the mood of the strike?
Well, the mood depends on what day you're there. The actual picket line went up last Monday, and at that time, that would have been Tuesday morning, the first vote being Monday, although there wasn't any work done on Monday. So beginning Monday, the mood out on what was to become a picket line Tuesday morning was very positive and upbeat. The workers were frustrated with the company. They feel the company had been taking advantage of them for many, many years, and they were ready to take a stand and demand what they're terming a living wage. Now, it did seem to vary a little bit, and by Friday, things were getting a little bit more divisive. And as a result, the means by which the vote was taken was complicated and awkward. They were trying to make sure that members wouldn't be influenced by anyone else when they were making their vote. And the logistics of making that happen out on a picket line can be a little difficult, and in the end, a number of people expressed some frustration with how long the process was taking and the means by which it was done. No one disputed the fairness of it or the accuracy of the outcome, just the difficulty of getting it done.
So is this a first strike for these members?
Well, there was, I believe, a very short-lived strike that I don't think actually involved a picket line because it was that short-lived before the current contract, and the one that just ended. And at that time, the workers accepted management's story that they weren't as profitable as they should be, and therefore the workers shouldn't take as much of increase as they wanted. And that seems to be at the root of a lot of the workers' feelings currently about having been taken advantage of.
So they feel betrayed. They feel like they trusted management, and they feel that management hasn't been living up to its word?
Well, it hasn't been fair with them. But that's exactly true. They scaled back what they were expecting from the contract that just expired. And now they're coming back and they're saying, well, listen, for 3 years we were living with less money in order to give you, management, a chance to better your situation, better the situation of the plant. Things look better, according to the union's analysis, and therefore it's only fair for the workers to be paid a little bit more.
So describe the makeup of the workforce. Is it mostly young people? What is the racial composition?
Well, the workforce is about 50-50 male and female. I would guess mostly people who are in their late 20s to early 40s, although there'd be more people older than that than people younger. It is overwhelmingly Chicano, mostly Mexican, and as that in and of itself adds to some complications because the labor force from Mexico expects laws which they were raised with, and labor laws in Mexico are a little bit different than they are here. Oddly enough, ironically enough, labor laws are more favorable to labor in Mexico than they are here.
That's interesting. So what exactly are they expecting? I'm not familiar with how the labor laws are in Mexico.
Well, as regards this particular situation, and there was an incident on Tuesday where this was came up, in Mexico it's not legal for anyone to cross a picket line that is a recognized picket line, as this is, recognized by the NLRB. So Tuesday the company was bringing in 3 pickup loads of scab workers from their farm. The farm workers aren't organized, so they're not represented by any union. Trucks were coming in early in the morning, and picket lines up, and people on the picket line weren't about to let anyone cross their line. And in their minds, they were doing not only what was right in a moral sense, but also what was right in a legal sense. Now, that's not true in this country. In this country, even if the picket is recognized by the government, the laws still favor management, and therefore management has a property right to bring in anybody that it wants.
So what happened when that occurred?
Well, the police were called eventually, and there was some upheaval, I guess. I know I did speak with some of the police after the fact, and that was something they were concerned with mitigating from there on out. One of the trucks did get into the plant. The other 2 were turned away and eventually went to one of the garages that the mechanics used to service trucks. And it's not known what those people ended up doing. It's interesting and perhaps more symbolic because 3 pickup trucks can't carry nearly enough people to have much of an impact on the processing that would need to be done in the plant to keep up with the production schedule.
Was there any violence, or what exactly did the police say happened?
Well, that depends on who you ask. I think from the police's point of view, it was more a matter of a situation involving civil disobedience and just civil disruption. And they were concerned about keeping any disruption to a minimum. Certainly people were yelling back and forth. I didn't hear any reports of injuries, although it is alleged by a couple of the workers that inasmuch as they were in the path of the trucks, that these trucks didn't slow down and did hit a couple of the workers.
Now, in relation to the other union, the Operating Engineers Union, are they also on the picket line?
They are now. That was part of the confusion. Since they had voted to accept the first contract offer, which would have been a week ago Saturday that the vote was taken, they all showed up for work on Monday and expected that they would just be getting on with their business. Second contract came down on Tuesday, and the operating engineers refused to vote on it, since their position was they had voted on the first contract. Now, by Wednesday, the NLRB had ruled that, in fact, it is a joint contract. It's just one contract for the 2 locals, so if it's not ratified, it's not ratified, and therefore the workers weren't working under contract. So by Thursday, they were out on the picket line.
Now, do you expect this to be a long strike?
That's, of course, difficult to say, as it is with any strike. The management seems very intransigent. They have said over and over again when they make a contract offer that that's their last contract offer. They've said that with each of the 3. So they seem to be more emphatic about it with each time. Whether or not they'll come back to the bargaining table or not, I don't know. They say they won't. But they've said that before. The part of all of this that is working in favor of the workers is that turkeys are processed on an enormous scale in the plant, and that it's an integrated operation involving the farm. So the turkeys are bred, they lay eggs, The eggs hatch, they raise the turkeys. When the turkeys are grown, they bring them into the processing plant. When turkeys are not able to come into the processing plant, that means they're living on the farm past the schedule by which they would be there. Now, by this time, the farm would be housing and feeding a little over 100,000 additional birds. It is a tremendous scale that they're operating on. That has to have significant costs to the company, feeding and housing all of those extra birds. So each day that they aren't processing the turkeys, another 14,000 are left on the farm. At some point, that situation in and of itself is going to become unwieldy. There also are not plants that are capable of processing those birds within a distance that would be reasonable for transporting them. The nearest plants would be in Kansas, and in the open-air trucks that are used to transport them, the birds surely wouldn't survive the journey. So the workers know that as well, and I think that is affecting their optimism to some degree.
Does it look like the company's trying to bust the union?
Well, seems like nowadays, anytime you enter a strike situation, that is part of what's going on. And I would suppose that since the union made a move to bring in scab workers so early in the strike, that they're taking a very aggressive stand towards this whole thing. And I'm sure from their point of view that if they didn't have a union, that would be better for them.
Is the company, from what you've heard, going to try and bring in more replacement workers?
Well, that also is difficult to determine. I think that the workers are expecting that to happen. Now, they don't know, and no one really knows where they'd get these workers from. The workers who are on the farm are, of course, needed for that work. Someone has to take care of the birds. So there are some workers who could be brought in, but the numbers would not even begin to approach the hundreds and hundreds of workers who are out on strike.
Now, this is a mostly Hispanic workforce. Have they received much support from the predominantly white community of Longmont?
Well, just standing on the line, you see some support. They're along Main Street in Longmont, so it's a busy street with a lot of traffic, and seems like a half, maybe a little less than half of the people driving by will honk in support of the strikers, and that always lifts spirits. People cheer back. I know that some of the other locals in the northern Colorado area have been dropping by to help out. Teamsters have been coming by in the mornings with urns of coffee and things like that. So there is support there. Hasn't been particularly organized at this point, but we're still real early on in the process, probably.
What kind of support are the workers seeking from the community?
I don't think they're really seeking support, any particular support. It's just nice to know that people are on your side, and people are sympathetic. So it's that kind of thing that they're looking for, just solidarity.
And how would you say this strike fits into the general work picture? How does it affect non-union workers?
Well, if they were successful in breaking this union, they would, of course, replace everyone with non-union workers, and one would suppose those people would be making, on average, $2 less an hour. So that would have a significant impact in Longmont. Longmont Foods is the second largest employer in the city, and it is the first largest private employer in the city. The county, I believe, has more employees. And that's a lot of people to be making less money in any community, and Longmont's really not that big of a city.
That's interesting about the economic impact it would have on a lot of small businesses, too. If the people don't have the money to buy goods and services, everybody suffers. What is going to happen next in the strike?
Well, the local is not talking much about their plans. I think that's just a matter of keeping their intentions confidential, because it is a complicated process and they don't necessarily want management to know what's coming next. management does the same thing with them, of course. The logical things to happen, at least the biggest thing that will probably come, is a boycott of Longmont Foods products, turkey products, organized around the country in order to affect the company's pocketbook in that way. Whether or not that boycott would take the form of boycotting all ConAgra products or not, I don't know. It's difficult to say, inasmuch as the company is so big and so diversified with so many different products. It's probably very difficult to organize such a boycott. But a boycott of Longmont Foods turkey products would be much easier to pull off. United Food and Commercial Workers is a large union in this country, and they do represent hundreds of thousands of workers. So just getting their workers to recognize a boycott around the country could presumably have some impact, and undoubtedly a lot of people would support them in a boycott.
Well, I want to thank you, Richard, for appearing on the Labor Exchange. I've been talking with Richard Curtis, who is covering the Longmont food strike. Ready to take down the following information for our announcements. Jobs with Justice, a coalition of labor, environmental, religious, and community groups, is having its monthly meeting this Thursday, February 15th, 6:30 p.m. at the Service Employees International Union Local 105 Hall at 1535 Logan Street in Denver. There will be free pizza and pop courtesy of the Electrical Workers Union Local 111. For more information, call Leslie Moody, the Jobs with Justice Director, at 781-8700. It's movie night with Jobs with Justice. Join Jobs with Justice's celebration of John L. Lewis's birthday and the 6th anniversary of the Pittston Coal United Mine Workers Settlement this Friday night, February 16th. There will be a party and showing of the film Mate 1. The social hour is from 5:30 to 7 p.m., and there is a cash bar. The movie begins at 7 o'clock p.m. It costs $3 for the flick, popcorn, and pop. Beer is extra. This event happens at 1252 Dexter Street in Denver. For more information, call Leslie Moody at 781-8700. Rally at the Denver Post. Jobs with Justice is holding a rally next Monday, February 19th, 12:15 p.m. at the Denver Post Plaza at Colfax and Lincoln Street in downtown Denver, in conjunction with the AFL-CIO Labor Day at the Capitol. According to Jobs with Justice, Denver Post management wants a 3-year wage freeze, increased management rights, a prohibition against workers' participation in rallies, pickets and actions, and a cutback in overtime pay and unlimited subcontracting. For more information about the rally, call Leslie Moody at 781-8700. Labor Day at the State Capitol. Workers can make their concerns known to their state legislators by participating in Labor Day at the State Capitol next Monday, February 19th. The Colorado AFL-CIO is planning a day-long series of events and speakers at the State Capitol, beginning with registration at 7:30 a.m. The Colorado Council of Teamsters is offering free bus transportation to the Capitol from the Labor Center at West 4th Avenue and Tacoma Street and the Teamsters Building at 3245 Elliott Street in Denver. The first bus will leave at 7:15 a.m. and round trips will be made continuously until the last bus leaves the Capitol at 2:15 p.m. Workers are encouraged to bring their families and children. For more information, contact the Colorado AFL-CIO at 433-2100. Thank you for listening to the Labor Exchange. If you have any comments or suggestions for future shows, please call the KGNU listener comment line at 447-9911. Stay tuned next Monday at 6 o'clock p.m. for La Lucha Sigue. In 2 weeks, we will be talking with members of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 3592 at the University of Colorado. So listen every Monday to La Lucha Sigue or the Labor Exchange. Thanks again. Bye-bye.